Today is Saturday, February 19th in the year 2000. It's my pleasure to be with Raul Castro, former governor of Arizona, among many other distinguished accomplishments, and a 1949 graduate of the University of Arizona College of Law. For the University of Arizona, James E. Rogers College of Law, I'm Dean Toni Massaro. Okay, we're first going to talk about the student life, and at that time in your life, how did you decide to go to law school?
I worked for the State Department in Agua Prieta, Sonora, Mexico, and had an inspection at the consulate, as they do border consulates, Consul General from El Paso, and he said, "Raul, I'm going to make some comments to you that are not critical. I'm just trying to do you a favor, so don't take them to heart." He said, "Look, you were born in Mexico with Mexican parents, and as you know, the State Department in those days was Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, very Ivy League. And I see some potential in it, but as far as the State Department is concerned, I don't think I'm getting very far with it because of that situation. So see what you think about it." I thought about it, and I thought that in my job in the State Department, part of my job was rescuing Americans from jail, and American that was incarcerated in Mexico. It was my job as State Department employee. You go inquire why they were in jail and see that due process was taking place and that human rights are respected. So I had contact with Mexican attorneys constantly. So that sort of inspired me that the legal profession was what I wanted.
Why Arizona?
Well, it was a fellow named captain at the air base, had Douglas Head during the war, found David Wolf from Indiana, had gone to Purdue, and now he's in the Air Force. And in the evenings, with nothing else to do in Douglas, Arizona, I taught Spanish gratuitously for personnel of the air base and as well as the local citizens. And he happened to be in that class. And one day he said, "Raul, why don't we go to law school? It's no sense staying here." And I thought about it, and that's where I made up my mind to law school. He already had applied for University of Arizona, and I was close by, so I thought this would be it. Quit my job and came to University of Arizona.
What was it like to get into law school at that time?
You want the truth?
Yes.
I naturally needed a job to go to law school, so I couldn't afford it otherwise. So I went to the administration building here at the university, and there was a doctor from Dr. Victor Kelly on administration. And I said, "Dr. Kelly, I need a job very badly, so I can't go to law school without a job. I can't afford it." And he said, "Well, Raul, you know perfectly well, this is a border town, and getting Mexican kids a job, forget about it. Why don't you go see the Mexican consul?" I said, "Dr. Kelly, I'm an American citizen now, I'm not a Mexican citizen. Why should I go see the Mexican consul?" "Well, we just don't have anything to offer." So that sort of aggravated me a little bit, and walked off from the administration building in Cross Hall, Maine. It's a fellow by the name of Dr. Voris, not Dr. Voris. He became late president of the university, dean of liberal arts. And I approached him. I said, "Dean, I like the law school and I need a job, and I think I can give a good service to the University of Arizona." "Why?" I said, "I think I can teach Spanish." I met the members of the language department. They're all highly qualified, tremendous, well-educated, good background, but their accent is very poor. They don't have a natural Spanish accent. "I think I can help these students with that." "Well," he said, "you're really confident." I said, "Yeah, I think I am. Can you prove it?" He said, "I have my transcript." Gave him a transcript. He said, "There was a lady by the name of Dr. Bufa who was teaching Spanish, got married last week. Classes start on Monday. I need a Spanish teacher very, very urgently." He said, "You've got a job." So I gave him the paper, signed the contract, and I was a member of the faculty. On the way out of that thing, I met Dr. Kelly again in front of all Maine. He said, "Raul, how are you?" I said, "Fine, you and I are colleagues." "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you never asked me." He said, "I can't get you a job," and now I do have a job. We became good friends afterwards, but that isn't the end of the story. How do I get to law school? So I came to law school, the old law school. Met a fellow, the only black lawyer in Arizona at those times. He was starting law school too, from Hazel Daniels. And he introduced himself, I introduced myself. He spoke Spanish, but he had lived at Nogales. I said, I'm ready to see the dean about getting into law school. Well, good luck. So I saw the dean, Byron McCormick. And he said, you know you have a teaching job, and it's a full-time job. You're trying to enroll in law school. And my experience has been with Mexican-American youngsters. They just can't cut the mustard in law school. They just can't do the job. I don't think I'm going to let you enroll in law school. I said, Dean, I don't want any favors. I just want the opportunity to get in law school. Well, I'm not going to do it. So he didn't. So I went to the president of the university, a fellow by the name of Atkinson, Dr. Atkinson. And I told him, I said, look, I have a teaching contract. Classes start on Monday. I want to go to law school. You know, I don't go to law school. You can consider the contract canceled. So he called Dr. McCormick and said, look, let this fellow in. Flunk him out. If he does, well, that's his problem. But that's how I started law school. So it wasn't a smooth sailing. I had problems. So in my first year of law school, I was taking third-year law classes because I had it fit my schedule in teaching. So therefore, I had to take whatever I could find. So you can see I was out of place all the way through. It was just, that's a disaster.
Be almost impossible. What courses did you take first?
I think I took constitutional law to start with, and then I think I took torts, and I took agency somewhere down the line, and in my last year, I was taking first year classes, so it's...
How many, it may not make sense to ask this, how many students were in your class?
I think probably might have been no more than 40 or 45. One girl, one lady.
What were the students
Marianne
like?
Ryman, Richie. She and I were classmates.
And what do you remember about your other classmates?
Well, Morris Udall we were in the same class, and Bob Miller in the same class. Trying to think who the others were. My name Rosengren out of Phoenix. Others were, Judge Marcus was 2 years behind me. Tom Chandler about a year ahead of me. And Reed, Carlock was about a year ahead of me. So it's, Stuart Udall was a year ahead of me.
What was the average age of students?
What was the average age? It was after the war. I think we were older, a little more mature people. I was 29 when I started law school. So you can see it wasn't fitting into the grain. Most of us were, much older because of the war.
Just one woman?
One woman, Marianne Ryman.
And it sounds like very...
She was Richie, became Richie afterwards, yeah.
Very few students of color. Hazel, you're saying Hazel...
Daniels
yeah.
was the first one. He and I studied for our exam, we studied for the bar exam. What do you do after midnight when you're hungry, you want to get something to eat? What do I take him? He couldn't be served anywhere. So there was a little place on Main Street off of Speedway called Jimmy's Chicken Shack, I believe. It was a Negro operated. So that's where we go for a cup of coffee and a hamburger. That's the only place we can go.
How did people in the law school treat the students, him and you and Marianne Ritchie?
No, law students were fine. I think law students are no problem whatsoever. They're good friends and good company and very understanding. No difficulty at all.
How about Dean McCormick?
We became very good friends. Later on, every time he'd go to Phoenix on business or something to do with the law school, he'd always ask me if I was joining. So we did. We became very good friends.
At that time, did they flunk out a lot of students, or did most people pass through?
No, they did. The first year rate of flunk outs was large, it was heavy. Yeah.
Was there summer school?
There was summer school, so I went to summer school too. I actually finished in 2.5 years. Finished in the middle of the year in January. So then in order to be able to stay in, I was teaching, I had to stay in school. I took extra courses. I remember taking a course in partnership, I believe. A fellow from the University of Valparaiso in Indiana was teaching it. I forgot his name. And he took great pride that he spoke Spanish, so he said, in Italian. He said, I'll try him out. So I tried him out and I wrote my Spanish and my exam in Spanish. All of my, because I didn't need the credits, I wrote it in Spanish, and I think it's probably the only A I ever gotten in law school was out of that class.
You had him. That's a good one. Sorry. Were there any clinical programs at that time?
No, the only clinical program was probably moot court, and I had another fellow from White, Indiana, I don't know, from Muncie, Indiana. Bob Faust was my partner in moot court. And then I argued the case in Spanish too, so I cared less at that moment. I already had all the credits I needed, so it's,
What kind of, well, were you working, you were teaching full-time plus going to law school at the same time?
coffee and donuts, that was a diet for my diet.
There's nothing like sugar and caffeine. What were the student activities at the time?
There weren't any student activities, that was just law school. You know, you went to law school, you studied at night, and the answer was that for every 2 hours in the classroom, you spent 2 hours out of class, supposedly. So it's, teaching wasn't that difficult except the grading of papers, as you well know. It's a chore trying to get your class program for the next day started and organized.
Where did most of the law students live at that time?
Law students lived in private homes or separate apartments away from the university, most of them.
Were there many faculty-student activities?
No.
A lot of the students married?
Quite a few were married, yes. The only unmarried one was me, I think, at that time. It was just, but it was, most of them were married and serious. They were mature people, really.
What were the job prospects like getting out of law school?
Well, the job prospects weren't very good, no. People had to scratch. In my particular case, a fellow named John Favor from Prescott happened to be in law school, also in my class. And when I graduated, he said, look, where are you going to go? I said, I don't know, John. I don't want to go back to the border town of Douglas. It's for the birds. He says, why don't you stay in Tucson? I said, well, I'm thinking about it. So he advanced me $600 so I could pay the first and last month's rent, and that's how I stayed in Tucson. No interest charge, paid it later. But
Great. Well then, so, okay. What was the bar exam like at that time?
the bar exam was the person giving the bar exam, Francis Riley. He was with the firm Riley Carlock, or if I forgot the name of it. It's one of the big law firms. And I had met him in Douglas because he had been the attorney for Phelps-Dodge Corporation. And there had been strikes, so he was negotiating the strike. And my brother was the president of the union, labor union in Douglas. So through that process, we met each other. So they give you a number, you sit down with the honor system, you walk into the courtroom there, the moot courtroom, and they give you the questions, and you're on your own. You know, you can go to the bathroom, go anywhere you wanted to on the honor system. And I had to type my exam. I had a typewriter I bought in Mexico, 20 years old. And in the typing process, one of the keys fell off and flew up into space. I couldn't find the key. It was an L. So I had to put an asterisk on there. Whenever there's an empty space, that's supposed to be an L. And as you know, it's timed. It was rather carefully timed. And I was very little worried and concerned that I wasn't meeting the time limit. But I finally did to make it out and turn it right. Yeah, I thought it was difficult, yes.
How many students in an average class?
Maybe 25 or 30.
What were the subjects? You said property, con law.
The fellow named Chester Smith was then teaching real estate, I think. Yeah, real estate law, I think. Constitutional law, torts, contracts. Dean McCormick taught that one. And then later, John Lyons, who was a dean, came in afterwards and taught contracts, I believe. And then they had visiting professors come in from different places.
What was Chester Smith like?
Who, Chester Smith?
Yeah.
He was a great pounder. You know, I have a teaching degree, so I had all these principles that I was supposed to have about teaching. And I thought law school wasn't the best example of teaching for any class. They knew the subject matter, but the teaching aspect was there, lacking. Chester Smith was very fiery. He'd pound on the desk. And he says, whatever you get free, it's not worth the hoop because it's free. And he kept you awake by shouted and screamed and pounded on the desk. And so one couldn't go to sleep very well, really. But everybody liked him. He's very friendly, very knowledgeable, very accessible.
Who was your favorite teacher?
I don't know that I had, it's fellow by the name of Feeser, taught torts. Can't think of his first name. Probably, there was a colonel, retired Colonel Thomas, hard of hearing, as hard of hearing as I am now, I guess. Taught agency, and I forget what other subject. I think he's probably the one I respected the most, really. Yeah.
Were the reading, what were papers required, or was it just the final exam?
Fought one exam. That was it, sink or swim. At the end of the semester, one exam, and that was it.
What was the predominant teaching technique besides pounding on the podium?
Well, the case law method still prevails, I guess. And even in those days, I recall many books I couldn't afford to buy, the old books. So I always sit in the front row so I could listen to the teacher. And from there, I'd take my notes and then try to follow from there. It's from a teaching procedure, I don't know. The teacher gets up, case law, you read the case, and you call on John, what is your version of this case, and what do you think about it? And it's the case law method, I think. It's still occupied, used in most instances.
Did they make you stand and recite?
Yes, right.
What was graduation like?
I don't know. I graduated, but I didn't go to graduation ever. You had to pay $50, I think, to graduate or something. That was more than I wanted to pay to graduate, so I think I just paid what I had to pay. But that's been true of every degree I've ever gotten. I never had graduated. I got my diploma, but I never went for any ceremony.
What do you know about, at that time, what did one have to do to become a law professor?
Become a law professor? Not very much. I think I had some people from town would come in and lecture, but they weren't full-fledged professors. No, most of the professors brought in from other universities came in because they liked Arizona, or salary was better, or better conditions, and they moved into this part of the world. Yeah.
Did they have to publish?
I think if you published, then I think you got a promotion. Some promotion. I don't think it was required, but I think most of them did do some publishing, yes.
How many faculty members were there?
I don't think there's more than 6, if that many. Really.
What do you remember about Dean Lyons?
John Lyons, and I think probably is one of the ones I admired too quite well. John Lyons was rather soft-spoken. He must have had asthma or something because he had difficulty breathing much of the time and spoke rather low key. A very good professor. And he made a subject very interesting, really, I think. He applied it to actual real conditions and living conditions, in other words, teaching contracts. He said if you want to rent a house or buy a property, what do? You get the contract. And so he put it into reality, into actual life and actual living conditions. It wasn't the abstract in the classroom. It's actually what you do in the outside world. So he was good.
Tell me more about Dean McCormick. What was he like?
Dean McCormick had, I think, had an SJD from Yale, Harvard or somewhere, and he was a good teacher, I think. Dean McCormick was rather profound and serious, very academic in every sense of the word. And I think he was a stickler for people coming to law school. He felt in order to come to law school, you had to devote all your life, blood and sweat to law school and nothing else. His favorite expression was that law school was a jealous mistress. Well, I found out it was true in that sense, but he was very demanding in that sense.
Your classes were in the Douglas building? Is that where the law school was then?
The law school was, it's a little building, I don't know what it is now. I have no idea what it is. It's a little next to the conference center, to the convention center. It's
Centennial Hall?
next to Centennial Hall, but I don't know what it's used for today.
What was that like, the building itself?
The building was rather cramped, rather small, and didn't have all the facilities that one needed, really. But it's after the war, and most of us were mature, and et cetera. We weren't demanding very much. Most of us were rather serious. We wanted to get an education, regardless of whatever happened. Very little playing around, very little partying around. Certainly law school didn't promote any parties or functions of any kind. It's, you go to class, get out of class, you study, and come back to class the next day, and that was it. I kept a chart in my room, and I marked every day like being in prison. One more day to go, one more day to go, and
What's the most interesting thing that happened when you were in law school?
I think the most fascinating thing and the most drudging part of my life was when I lost that key taking the bar exam. I couldn't find it. I got up and looked for it, and I couldn't find that key, and I could look at my watch, and time was clicking by, and this is 3 years of my life in law school, and I'm anxious to go work for a living and help my mother was, during that time, and the best I could do was just put that asterisk. If there's an empty space, it's supposed to be now, so. And then when I turned in my exam, Francis Riley was there, and he said, well, how did you do? I said, oh, fine, I think I'll survive.
It's funny that you lose the letter L in a law exam.
Can you imagine?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's amazing what does go wrong. What was that one, the story you heard?
Barbara, what happened where the guy came in and he put a big Selectrix with the ball. And he had all these balls, and he started typing, it didn't work, took the ball off, put another ball on, and finally just said, does anybody have a pencil? And it was like,
Can you imagine?
There were
the
three
terror?
people taking the exam with typewriters. Morris Vidal was one, myself, and probably named Bob Miller was also typing his exam. Very noisy, but everybody got away from us. It was too noisy. But it survived.
So what else was going on in the world at large when you were going to law school?
Well, you really didn't have much time for anything. Law school and teaching, that's about it. And, I had an exposure to law on the Mexican side in Mexico because I worked with Mexican attorneys, and I've been exposed to their code. It's that thick. But it's all statutory, of course. It's not, it's codified in every sense of the word. And so I had an exposure to Mexican law for the last 50 years, I guess. And coming into law school, it was difficult for me because of the language situation. I was working in Mexico, and I'd spend 8 hours, 10 hours a day, all Spanish, with Mexican attorneys, and interviewing anybody crossing the border had to see me. So my conversations all were in Spanish. And now the letter writing was in Spanish. So coming into law school here, changing into the English language wasn't a little hard to settle it. And then at home, we never spoke English. My mother never spoke any English, and my father had died, left 13 kids, and none of us spoke English, so it's all Spanish at home. So it's quite a change coming into an Anglo-Saxon type of way of life where I had lived before. But it turned out fine. I thought it was great because it gave me an entree into other languages, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and that type of thing, German and French, whatever it was. So it helped. It helped in the Foreign Service later on when I came in as a diplomat.
I'm going to talk about that in a sec, but before we leave school time, were there a number of classmates who'd actually been in the war?
Oh yes, yeah, most everyone had been in the war, yes. Yeah.
They talk about it much?
No, really, and the thing that surprised me the most was the fact that law school was a law school, very serious. Because after the war, people were older, some were married, and they were serious. They had a family to worry about, to support, and there wasn't much chit-chat. There's a class, go home, and come back to class. That impressed me.
I've noted that in a lot of them. What would you say is the defining characteristic or personality of the University of Arizona College of Law? What's distinctive about it in your mind?
Well, what was distinctive to me at the time was that most of the students who were law students were not very affluent. Everybody was scratching for a living. So therefore, we were both in the same category, in the same class. There was none of this, you're better than I, and et cetera, and your bank account is very much on the level of when do graduates would make a living. So that impressed me because it wasn't the Yale Harvard type thing that I'd been exposed to in the Foreign Service. I'd been in the Foreign Service. And anybody I'd met in that service was pretty well from back east. And the feeling was a little difficult, a little hard to penetrate. They didn't quite fit into the Western structure. For instance, when I got in the Foreign Service, and I had to go from Arizona to Washington, the question arose, who pays for my transportation and my furniture and my moving, etc.? They weren't used to having anyone from the West enter the Foreign Service. Most everyone was from Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and that type of thing. So my going into the Foreign Service from Arizona, here's a cowboy coming in, what do we do with him, you know? It's
Probably still true. If you were going to change one thing about legal education, what would it be?
I think having been exposed to a lot of law schools, in fact, in visiting, for instance, all of Latin American law schools, I've been rather active in their operation to some extent. And I've also been exposed to the Ivy League. I've been in Harvard, lectured there several times, and so I have in Stanford. In fact, the president of Stanford visited me in Argentina. He said, I want you to come to Stanford lecture. I want you to come to law school and talk to my students. So I've had that opportunity, and I can see the different changes that have occurred. And no, I think the law school in Arizona compares to any law school. That was my feeling. I visited many law schools, and the comparisons is, I'd say, very much very close. Good education, good background. Of course, it all depends on the students. If the students are serious about it, it'll take. If they want to play playboy and play type, it's not going to happen. And in law school, I don't think you can do it, really. I just don't have time for fraternity life. Things changed when I was teaching on the other end of the line, liberal arts. I would be teaching, and the girls would come in Levi's and jeans, and during the war, knitting their sweaters. And I'd look up, I said, ladies, you're here to listen to me. I'm here to teach you Spanish. If you want to listen, you've got to watch carefully. I'm not going to allow you to sew sweater jeans for your boyfriends. Go back to the dormitory. If you want to come to class, come back. But out you go. I could do it. Now you can't. You'll be sued for sexual harassment or anything else, failure of due process or otherwise. But in those days, the teacher had run and build. I could run my class the way I wanted it should be.
If you were going to give a message to future law students, what would that be?
Number one, I think you have to try to recognize whether or not you're suited for law classes or law school. It isn't a question of memorizing theories and rules and whatever you do in many other schools. Memorization is not the answer to it. It's a question of what's the end result? How do you reach it? How do you reach that conclusion? You have to have an analytical mind to try to evaluate it. And if you're not suitable for that type of a thing, then get out. Don't even start it. It isn't a question of trying to memorize the torch book. No, it's not going to do it. And I think many students find that to be the fact that you've got to be able to, what the answer is, who cares? How did you arrive at that answer? Were you able to think? Were you able to rationalize with it? You know?
What do you think, what would you like to see the U of A Law School accomplish in the future?
Well, my contact with the law school at U of A for the last few years has been, I'd say, almost nil, even though I've been that close. For some reason, I don't know why I lost contact with the law school, because I guess my memories weren't that great from the viewpoint of, I was struggling. It was a struggle. And I felt that then struggled to go out and work. My answer to the law school would be is that I think the students ought to be chosen a little better, and you probably are now as they come in to enroll. Give the student at least a week or 10 days to evaluate himself. Are you able to come into law school? This is what it takes. And give them a little briefing as to what law school is all about. Many people believe it's a question of just, as you do in most schools all the way through, try to memorize formulas and memorize things and dates, and it doesn't quite do the job with you. And I felt that's very essential for a law student to recognize before he comes into law school. And also identify law school, what you're learning in law school, with the outside world. Where does it fit? Where does it come in?
What's your sense of what's happened to the legal profession since you started practicing years ago?
Well, there's no shortage of lawyers all over the world. As I've traveled all over the world several times. Everywhere I go, of course, I always come in contact with attorneys. And there are plenty of us all over the world. We're looked upon as ants. But well respected, I think, in most countries. An attorney is well respected. He's supposed to be knowledgeable, supposed to be an intellectual, an intellect of some kind down the line. And I think the legal profession, I'm very proud of it. I think it's great. And I think, Arizona ranks rather high in that sense. I go to California and still they think of Arizona as a very good law school, held in high regard. I remember Dan Frost, I hadn't seen him in 25, 50 years. Saw you, I think he told me he'd seen you and chatted with you. And Dan Frost was a year ahead of me in law school. Dan came from California, from Los Angeles, or there had the biggest law firm in town. And then his parents were up in Washington somewhere. And I hadn't seen Dan in 50 years, I guess. Finished law school, I hadn't seen him. And he went to Nogales last week. We got together, he and his wife and friends, and chatted. This tall, gangly guy with blonde, curly hair, and as wrinkled as I am, as old as I am. So, I'm 84. I'll be 84 in June. So you can see, and I'm still working every day. I go to court and scream and holler like everybody else does.
You look marvelous.
And I'm afraid to quit. I don't have any hobbies. So I'm afraid, what do I do if I quit? I don't know. I can't visualize doing it.
Charles Ayers and I talk about that.
Chuck was deputy county attorney when I was county attorney. He and I were fractioned together. In other words, Morris Udall was the county attorney, Charlie Ayers was there, became deputy county attorney. I succeeded Morris Udall as county attorney. Then I got on the bench for about 4 or 7 years, Superior Court judge. And Chuck, of course, was a deputy county attorney. And married his wife, Jean, who was my student at the university. I think his wife's name was Jean. He used to work in a telephone company. And then she was my student at the university, taking Spanish. Yeah.
They just celebrated.
Small world, isn't it?
Yes, they just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary.
And Chuck and Jean, no kidding, is that right? I left school in 49, so that's about right. Mm-hmm.
So tell me about your career.
Well, like everything else, I'm a very unsettled person. I don't know. I hate routine, and I despise anything that becomes routine. I got on first. David Wolf became my law partner. Very bright guy. I guess he was terrific, bright student. And my time was limited, and Dave was quite a researcher. He'd come in and research a case for a couple of hours, and I'd ask him, "What do you think about this case? How would you analyze? How would you evaluate it?" I said, "Dave, this would be my answer." "Well, you're right, but how did you conclude?" I said, "Dave, this is just common sense. My view of the law is that there's an objective, justice, and to be fair about it, be fair, and arrive at a just conclusion. And to arrive at a just conclusion, you must use common sense, common judgment. And to me, this is to be, common sense would be it." And it worked, in that sense of the word. I think later on, Dave became well known, very bright student. He also was my student at the university. My roommate, he'd taken classes from me at the university. It's a very small world. In the law practice, I felt that I got on the bench. In those days, you ran for public office. You weren't appointed. You ran for county attorney. The first Mexican-American to ever run for public office in this part of the world. In fact, it was crazy. Who's going to vote for you? What do you say that? Well, you're born in Mexico, Mexican parents. How can you expect to get elected? Whoever tried it? Everybody's complaining. Nobody tried it. I want to try it. And then I have a right to complain. I tried it, won by 16 votes. 16 votes. All my brothers never voted for me. I was annoyed. "Why didn't you vote?" "Because our vote doesn't count." I said, "Yes, it counts. I just barely made it." Then I ran for judge of Superior Court and got elected twice. And I got bored being on the bench because the BI case, intersection case, it's the same old subject. You have run to the intersection, failure to stop, becomes routine. You get the file, you look at it, and criminal law the same way. How many elements do you have in criminal law? It becomes routine, and you get on the bench, you hear the story over and over again. That's not for me. So I said, I'm going to quit this business. It's not helping me any. I don't see any interest in it. I was at Army Park in Tucson giving a speech with Lyndon Johnson, running for President of the United States. And I gave my little pep talk, and he gave his, and that's how I got to know him. Then he later appointed me to be ambassador to El Salvador. So it's been rather fascinating in that sense. I had the opportunity in the Foreign Service to go to the White House. Is always my second house. I would walk in as an ambassador, meet the president, and have contact. Kissinger and I became rather good friends. He stayed in my house for a week in Argentina. And a funny story about him, I think he feels he's very knowledgeable. He thinks he's quite the boy about the world, impressed with himself, has a good ego. And it was about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and my wife hadn't gotten up yet. We were having coffee, he and I. And looked at me, he said, Raul, you and I can't be president of the United States. I said, why do you say that, Henry? He said, well, I was born in Germany, you're born in Mexico, we just can't be president. I said, well, that's true, and there was a little hesitancy. A moment of quiet. He said, but you know, you don't have any accent. I do. I said, Henry, I'm smarter than you, that's why. That was a low blow, but.
What was LBJ like?
Oh, Tiger. He wanted me to go work for him in the White House. He, rather interesting, he spent a week at our house. I came from work one day and I went to go to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom and I noticed there were lights coming from under the toilet seat. I said, what's happened here? And the shower head was about 3 feet higher than I'm used to having it. Well, Lyndon Johnson, the president, had been in town. He's very tall and he likes to have a lot of light under the bathroom and the toilet. And he also wants the shower to be high. And he had the swimming pool, frogmen, and all kinds of monitor systems to keep people from coming in. And very demanding. And in the Foreign Service, as an ambassador, the things on the wall, the paintings like these, don't belong to the government, belong to the ambassador. It's my job to put them on there. If he likes something, he would take it off and take it home, take it with him. To this day, a lot of things we haven't found. He gave a party in El Salvador at the hotel, and he wanted me, he said, look, you know, Angelo Duke was in the protocol officer. And he said, look, I haven't been in this country for X number of years. People are coming in to this reception. The president wants the name of everybody coming in and their occupation. I can't do it. Will you take over as protocol officer and introduce everyone to the president? So I stood in line, the president was next to me. People would come in, they all knew me, and wanted to check with me, you know, about whatever. After about 10 minutes, the president kicked me and said, look, I didn't put you here to have people come and talk to you. I want them to come and talk to me. So, all right, he was the boss. So then I introduced him as an engineer, and then said down the line, he speaks 10 languages or whatever the situation was. When he finished, he said, I like the job you did a very good job. I want you to work for me in the White House. I said, after seeing what he had done, I said, no way would I work for this man. I said, Mr. President, I am a Foreign Service animal. I prefer to be overseas. I'd rather be abroad. And I don't like Washington, D.C. I'd rather stay abroad. So that's where we left it, and I didn't go. So. But he was very difficult to work with. And then I went to Bolivia when Che Guevara was regime king. At that time, Nixon was the president. And he had the vice president was Nelson Rockefeller. And Nelson Rockefeller wanted to run for president. And I thought that President Nixon had sent Rockefeller to Latin America to kill him because he wasn't liked in Latin America. He personified Standard Oil Company. And all those countries in Latin America felt that the octopus of the world were Standard Oil and the big oil companies. He went to Ecuador, he was booed. This is Nelson Rockefeller, went to Venezuela, got the same treatment. I received a cable in Bolivia that he was coming, wanted to come and visit Bolivia. send a cable back. Under no circumstances we allow you to come to Bolivia. You'll be killed in Bolivia. Bolivia was rather primitive, a lot of terrorism, and people were on the extreme left. Nelson Rockefeller was on the right side, and it was a difficult country. He wasn't satisfied with my cable. He said, well, I can go to Santa Cruz, which is a city close to the Argentine-Brazilian border, but still in Bolivia. I said, no, I will not accept that. You just cannot come into the country. He's extremely unhappy, so he wanted to compromise. What do we do? And he was trying to put the pressure on through Nixon, come into Bolivia. Well, as ambassador, it's my prerogative to make that determination. Finally, I reconciled and allowed him to come to the airport. The airport is 14,000 feet up in the air. And there's only one road to La Paz. It's in a hole. So I'll give you a reception at the airport. Bring the diplomatic corps. Everybody will be there who's supposed to be there. The American press. We'll spend a couple of hours at the airport. And then you get on your plane and take off. And that's what we did. So he and his wife Happy were there. Had a great reception. Was never happy with me because I had been rather arbitrary in allowing him to come to the country, and neither was President Nixon, because he wanted him to be fried in Bolivia. And that didn't happen. So therefore, about 2 months later, I received a cable, a telegram from Bolivia, saying from President Nixon, we love you dearly, you've done a great job in Bolivia, we accept your resignation. So here's how I came back. In the meantime, Barry Goldwater was at the other end, going to the White House talking to President Nixon, saying, look, whatever you do, don't bring Raul Castro to Arizona. It's a mistake. All the oil companies in Bolivia are getting free legal services from him. He's very knowledgeable in the Spanish language, knowledgeable in the Bolivian law. He was able to assist the American firms. Keep him in Bolivia. Barry Goldwater didn't want me to come into Arizona. He said, if he comes into Arizona, he's going to beat our pants. Well, I got the telegram to leave the country, and I came. I ran for governor, and Barry Goldwater was right. He got elected. So that's life in so many places.
Did you ever meet Nixon?
Yes, I met him. He was rather cold. Of course, we're from opposite sides, but his political life. Carl Hayden called me. He was in the Senator from Arizona, chairman of Appropriations Committee, very powerful. And he called me one day and told me, he says, Raul, I want you to know that the president has asked for your income tax reports. He's looking to see what he can find. Well, I knew it was coming pretty well. He didn't find anything, but that's the way the game is played. And I knew President Carter quite well. I got to know him well, Jimmy Carter.
Tell me about that.
President Carter was, I'm embarrassed. I wasn't very friendly when he first called me. I was living in Phoenix at a motel. Already had been elected governor in November. And I made an appointment with labor unions to dedicate the labor union, plumbing's union in Phoenix at 5 o'clock in the evening. The phone rang that evening and he said, this is Jimmy Carter. Could I see you, Governor? I said, well, I have an appointment at 5:30 and I don't think I have time to see you. He said, look, I promise you it won't take more than 10 minutes of your time. If it's 10 minutes, I'll see you. So he came in, knocked at the door, and said, I'm Jimmy Carter. Well, Jimmy Carter who? Meant nothing to me, Jimmy Carter. Came in with somebody else who later became Secretary of Agriculture from Georgia. And we chatted, and he said, you know, I know what you're going through. I used to be governor of Georgia. That's great, we have something in common. But I kept looking at my watch, and my interest was the labor union to try to dedicate. I knew what the votes were. And I wasn't very civil. I said, Mr. Carter, I'd like to talk to you, but I don't have the time to talk to you. And I opened the door and practically pushed him out, never realizing that he was going to be my boss later on, or President of the United States. Later on, when he got elected, before he got elected, then he called me again. He said, look, I want you to campaign for him. After he had been elected, just before the election. So I campaigned with him on Peanut number 1. That was the name of his airplane, Peanut number 1, Jimmy Carter. Traveled to San Francisco, California, Illinois, and coming from between Los Angeles and San Francisco, he said, look, I want to meet Jerry Brown in Los Angeles, and when we get there, we'll have a good chat. And when I get elected, this is before the election, when I get elected on January the 20th, I want you to be my legal advisor, or rather Latin American advisor, and be with me. And I thought, this is crazy. I campaigned for him in Illinois, Iowa, Kansas. No way he'd get elected, I felt. But he was dreaming, so. And to heaven to hold, he got elected. And every time I go to the White House, he'd always look at me and says, do you remember when we first met in Phoenix? I didn't want to be reminded of it because I wasn't very courteous about it. But he always brought it up. But he's a very good man, a very decent individual, and very religious, very sincerely religious, wasn't a put on. I didn't particularly care for his advisors, but he was a very sound man, very good. I liked him very much.
Then after that, you were advisor, you were ambassador under Carter.
Argentina?
Argentina.
What was that like?
Argentina, they wanted me to go to Mexico as ambassador. And the governor of Wisconsin, I forgot his name, had a wife who was quite ill. And he was going to go to Argentina. And he came to me and says, Raul, would you consider going to Argentina? Can we exchange? My wife is rather ill and she wants to be close to the States for medical purposes, to be close to hospitals and that type of thing. I said, I'll buy it, I'll jump at it, because I was born in Mexico. I've got too many relatives in Mexico. And there'll be an albatross having that many relatives in Mexico and being in public office. I don't want them, I don't want to deal with them. So I agreed to go to Argentina, and he went to Mexico. And Argentina at the time was having difficulty with human rights violations because of the war, killing people, etc. Our relations were rather strained at the time. I went to Argentina, and I wasn't very well accepted when I first arrived in Argentina. Argentina wanted a typical Anglo-Saxon ambassador, freckle-faced, red-headed Anglo type, and I obviously didn't fit that role. They claimed to be European and not Latin American, so they didn't part Latin American. So their concern was, why send us a Mexican here when, as an ambassador? It took me 3 months to walk the streets and meet the taxi drivers and everybody else. And, I knew the political structure well, so I was able to infiltrate most everything. The man on the street, everyone knew me. They were the ambassador. So later on, I had no problems after that in Argentina. But the relations between the United States and Argentina were not very good. I was able to maintain a very good relationship because I was able, on a person-to-person basis, deal with the president of Argentina and members of the cabinet on my personal basis, not officially, because we didn't have really good relations. I had a phone that connected to the president's office, and I was able to communicate with him. Their ambassador had to write a note asking for an appointment. I didn't. I could pick up the phone and zoom I go in. So it worked out quite well in that sense. In the war with England started between Argentina and England over the Malvinas, or the Falkland Islands. It's rather fascinating. I thought Argentina it is a European country in the sense of the word. No blacks in Argentina, no Indians, lily white. So I had 3 black girls on my staff in Argentina, and I shed tears with them. They'd come in and see me every morning. Tears, Mr. Ambassador, I'd like to change the post. I walked on the street, people would touch your hair, kinky hair, or touch your face, even color would rub off. And had difficulty renting apartments, place to stay. But it's a better world now, I think. Argentina's improved. It's doing well in that sense of the word. I think the legal profession, I think the world of it, because you can do a lot of things with it. You don't have to practice law. You can be insurance. You can do anything in the world. Teach. It fits any pattern, any industry practically, really. I think it's a great thing.
What did you do after you left Bolivia?
I came to Phoenix and practiced law in Phoenix. Bolivia? No, I came to
Argentina.
Tucson. When I left Bolivia, arrived at the airport in Tucson, and John Malloy and a fellow by the name of Ed Loper, Secretary of the YMCA, met me at the airport. He said, Raul, we want you to run for governor. I said, what? Run for governor? I said, look, I've been in Bolivia, in that part of the world. Nobody knows me. I've been ostracized for several years. I don't know. You can do it. So they encouraged me to run for governor, and I did run for governor because of their encouragement. I ran for governor and lost the first time, practiced law in Tucson, then was re-elected. And then that was when I went to Argentina.
How did you know John Malloy?
John Malloy had met him on the bench. He sat, his courtroom was next to mine. I was Superior Court number 5, and John Malloy was number 4. And so we got to be good friends because we had similar cases and we worked together quite closely. They had 5 Superior Courts in those days. They had John Malloy, Herbert Crocker, Mercer Johnson, myself, and Lee Garrett.
And after Argentina, what did you do then?
For Argentina, I returned and came to Phoenix and practiced law in Phoenix for about 10 years.
And then what did you do after that?
After Phoenix, I moved to Nogales. I used to have a horse farm here in Tucson on River Road and Dodge. So when I was on the bench, I had a horse farm on River Road and Dodge, had about 100 head of horses, Shetland ponies, Hackney ponies, Arab horses, and all kinds of horses. There was a zoo. I had all kinds of animals, Irish wolfhounds, and turkeys, and peacocks, and you name it. And my job on weekends was to paint the fence. Not that I volunteered. My wife, she gave the orders. You know, she's Milwaukee, Wisconsin, German Irish girl, Acton. And on weekends I'd have this to go paint the fence, a white picket fence. And I put on a pair of Levi's and boots and a straw hat, and I'm painting the fence. And one day comes a car, immigration, U.S. Immigration Patrol. In pidgin Spanish, very poor Spanish. ¿Tiene usted tarjeta? Do you have a card? I said, no. ¿Con quién trabaja usted? For whom do you work? For the lady there at the house. And I see their eyes rolling, ready to throw me in the paddy wagon. I said, wait a minute. Did you see that sign in the front gate? It says Castro Pony Farm. I happen to be Castro. Oh, are you Judge Castro? Yes, I am. 1,000 apologies, but that's life in the tropics. Then I'd have the experiment. I'd go to San Diego and get a bus in San Diego, just for my own experience, and to come to Tucson. And it's an experience because you get on the bus in San Diego, immigration jostles you when you get on the bus. Where were you born? Well, born in Mexico. That's enough to, start the flag flying. So then I'd convince him that I was all right, that I was legally in the country. And I'd get to Yuma, and El Centro was next. And they jostled you again. And one day, my experiments, I had about 10 illegal Canadians on the bus. See what would happen then. It was illegal as anybody else. I was legal, they weren't. But they'd always make a beeline for the Hispanic. And the Canadians weren't touched at all. By the time I get to Tucson, I felt like I was like a baseball, something push to shove. Because everywhere you go, the immigration comes in, does the questioning. So that's an experiment in itself, really.
How did you meet Acton?
Me who?
Your wife?
Oh, my German friend. She was Milwaukee. Her mother had asthma and emphysema, and everything in the world that goes with it. Moved to Tucson for the winter time, supposedly, and was spending the winter time in Tucson. The daughter came from Milwaukee to meet the mother in Tucson. I'd just gotten out of law school. I was practicing law, and I would every morning would go to a drugstore on Scott and Congress, at Litt's drugstore, have a cup of coffee to get my mail at the post office. And at the end of the bar, the place was a blonde, attractive girl, and through the mirror we'd see each other. And by this time she'd gotten a job as a secretary to the postmaster in Tucson, and later became deputy U.S. Marshal. So as the days came by, we get closer and closer to the mirror. And we were next to each other. So then that's how it started. We had a date, and I courted for 4 years. I wasn't the marrying type. Don't forget, I started law school at 29. I'm getting the 30s now. And I wasn't the marrying type. I was still dreaming about accomplishing something. I was very dissatisfied, unhappy to the extent that I felt I could do more, I could do better, and I want to accomplish something. I'd look at Kennedy at my age, look what he's done, and somebody else my age, look what they're doing in Congress, and look what everybody else is doing. What am I wasting my time? I should be doing something more benefit to the country. And I was very unhappy in that sense. I was the worst critic myself. I was the worst critic. So I ran for county attorney, and she was my campaign manager to speak of. We had all these ponies that we started to raise by that time. And hitched a little cart with a sign, Castro for county attorney, and her mother and everybody else campaigned for me. That's what it turned out to be. It's a strange world to the extent that bigotry and it's one of the, really I came to law school on a white horse thinking that I could change the world, that I could play the level field could be a little plainer, a little more level. I couldn't go to the swimming pool in Douglas, I couldn't swim, and I couldn't do this, I couldn't go to an office job because my job was to be a peon. As long as I had a pick and shovel, everybody loved me, but as long as I became competitive, I'm no longer loved. So I felt that going to law school, I might be able to improve this thing. So I came in here and I started law school and finished with the same theory in mind when I left law school that I could do something. I opened up an office at 199 North Church in Tucson. I got a lot of bricks, put them as bookcases. Anybody would give me a book, I don't care what it's about. But as long as it looked like a book, people would come in and say, this guy is marvelous, he reads all these books. So I had all these books in my library. I had in the middle room was a kitchen where I cooked. In the back room was a bedroom. That's where I slept. And the front office was my office. People would come in for legal services. I had an Italian woman came in, and I speak enough Italian to get by and handle it. And this woman didn't speak any English except Italian, so we we were able to get along because we sort of spoke the same lingo. And one day she couldn't pay me, so she paid me with tamales or whatever she could find. And this same Italian lady one day came in with the chicken. She had roasted chicken. She wasn't well. Her mind was beginning to be lost. Turned the chicken loose in my office, and feathers all over the place. And that's the only way she could pay me with my advice. She was having trouble with Social Security and was helping her out. And Dave Wool came in that morning and said, what's happened here? Feathers all over the place. This Italian woman who just, later she was committed to the state hospital. But that's where it started. And then every lawyer in town was but the same way. Would go by the office on Saturday, stop by it, and I always had a bottle of tequila. I would drink tequila. And Bill Fry, who later became district judge. And, all kinds of lawyers would stop by, and we'd have a little conference, sort of a bar meeting, and just compare notes as to how poor we were.
So you got married, what year did you get married?
Got married in 1900, and I was 39 years of age when I got married. 39, so it must have been 1940, well, 54. 1954.
Did you have kids?
Pardon?
Did you have kids?
2 girls. Yeah, two girls, yeah. They're living, one in President of the Chamber of Commerce in Nogales, another one as a chef in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
And when did you sell off the horse farm?
When I came from Argentina, I was too far to take care of the horses, so I had to sell the horse farm. Something to my enjoy, as you had been exposed to this business. My wife, I was a professional boxer. When I left school, first to get BA, I couldn't get a teaching job. I applied for a teaching job in Douglas, my hometown. The superintendent principal called me in, and he gave me a letter, the principal of high school, by the name of Burkefield, saying I was on top of my class, I was a good student, bilingual, he could do well for any firm in town, any commercial firm in town, etc. But he recommended I don't go to college, because Raul, Mexican kids are wasting the time going to college, they can't get jobs afterwards, it's very difficult to place them, so don't waste your time going to school, to university. So then he sent me to the superintendent of schools, by the name of Carlson. Same story, don't go to college, it's a waste of time. Obviously, I didn't follow their advice. So I got I became an amateur boxer, captain of the boxing team in school, undefeated. Then I came to get this teaching job that I wanted to get. And they told me we don't hire Mexican people to be school teachers. We can't. School board met last night, and we don't hire Mexican teachers. So how do I go home and tell my mother, Mother, I can't, I've got to leave, I can't work, I can't teach school here. So she called the whole brood, it's a big family, and says, look, Raul's got to leave, he can't get a job, he's leaving town. And one brother retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Army, says to go back to Mexico. Another one followed in, let's go back to Mexico. And Mother said, look, you're forgetting one thing, you came to this country on an asylum basis. We came to this country, all of you've gotten a job, you've worked, you've got an education to some extent. The fact that Raul is not able to get a job, that's not the end of the world. Where one door opens, and now one it closes, and vice versa. So therefore, if any of you here do not do your duty to this country, there's the door. You're welcome to come back when you want to. But we owe responsibility to this country. This, my mother was hurt, and that was where the guts came in. She had a lot of guts in that sense. Nobody left, they all stayed. I got a freight train that afternoon and went all over the United States. Became a boxer because I had used my fist for years as an amateur. So then I could pick up easy money going to New Orleans and Pennsylvania and set all over the place and pick $100, $50, whatever they could pay me. I got this crap in Pennsylvania, got in the ring and did all the things that boxers do. In those days, you could not ever find a Mexican in Pennsylvania, there weren't any. So I got into the ring and did the service in one big voice, kill the Dago, kill the what? I was the Italian. But you know, there were Italians in Pennsylvania, but no Mexicans. So nobody knew what I was. They assumed I was Italian, so they started putting me away. And it's the first time I heard the word bohunk, another derogatory word for Yugoslavians and Serbians. In that area, it's a mining community. So they hear those expressions. And from then on, I went to New York, and everywhere I went, of course, everybody assumed I was Italian, and there weren't any Mexicans in New York in those days, or Puerto Ricans or anything else. So I went into the Italian community, well received, well accepted. From there, I went to Minnesota, Milwaukee, in that area. And, you know, it's so I learned. I think I had one objective in mind. It's been my philosophy to try to do something to make people realize that there are many inequities that perhaps through understanding people could make it a better world. For instance, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I was there, people that I met, my wife, there was a Polish girl, man marrying an Italian girl. Well, all hell broke loose. There's a war between the Italian family and the Polish family. So you can see that from where I came from, I could see that happening, but it was totally unacceptable to me. I thought this has got to stop. And I thought by doing just different jobs, I could be able to improve things in that sense.